Conversation with the Candidate continues.
Thank you for clicking on our extended digital conversation with the candidate, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York. We have our crack team of New Hampshire voters here with their questions, and we're going to start this half hour commercial-free with Carolyn Morrill.
Hi there. I'm going to ask you about prescription drugs.
Yes.
I have one friend, his drug price went from $19 to $60 this month. Another one who went from $41 to $200. Have you or anyone in Congress taken a step to start that ball rolling to help with the greed of prescription drugs so that when you become president, you would be able to sign the bill within the first 100 days?
Yes. So thank you. And I'm sorry you have been really price gouged. The fact that the prices of the medicines that you need keep going up is unconscionable. And it shows the real greed and corruption within the drug industry. So I would do a couple of things. I've been working on legislation that's very strong to end price gouging. And what it would do is if a drug company raises their rates every year by more than a certain amount, that you would be able to claw back their profits from that drug to stop them from price gouging. Second, for Medicare, I would make sure we go back to the drawing board and tell the drug manufacturers that for Medicare patients, you have to give them the lowest price for the drug available anywhere. It's absurd that Canada gets cheaper drugs than America, but that was the sweetheart deal that was made in the dead of night during George W. Bush's administration when they wrote Medicare Part D, and those drug companies came in and guaranteed that they would always get to charge whatever they like. So I would make sure if we're going to build on Medicare for all, one of the first things you do is renegotiate that and get the lowest price. And last, if you are someone who should have access to a generic drug, like insulin, it should be generic. It's not yet. It's shocking. It's been decades, and it's still not generic. I would, if that company would not, first I'd try to change our patent laws so it would be harder for them to keep just changing the patent in such small ways to guarantee no generic. I would ask the NIH to start producing drugs and create a not-for-profit public competition for any drug that should have been generic and have been publicly available for more than 10 years and still not generic. I would go after them directly because it's not right. And it's true for the drug PrEP, the drug you need to survive if you have AIDS. It's $14,000 a year, and that's not right. No one should have to go bankrupt just to save their lives. And I just think there's too much greed in the system.
Thank you.
And then the last was get the money out of politics, which will help. Yeah.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next question comes from Elizabeth Radisich.
Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you, Senator. You were one of the early leaders in the Me Too movement, and one of the hallmarks of that is how you spoke out early for Senator Franken to resign. And I agreed with you on that decision for him to resign. However, over this last 2 years, as things have unfolded, I have felt that my personal judgment that he should go was maybe hasty and incorrect. Looking back on that situation and reflecting, is there anything that you would have changed about how you would have handled that?
No. Most people don't know the facts around what happened. Senator Franken had 8 credible allegations against him, 2 since he was senator, and the 8th one was a congressional staffer. And I had a decision to make whether I was going to continue to stay silent and defend him and carry his water, or say what I believed, that it's not okay. Senator Franken had his own decision to make. His decision was whether to stick it out, go to his ethics committee hearing, wait for his next election. Those are his decisions. No senator at all can make another senator resign. I can just express myself. Now, as a mother of boys, I have 2 boys, one's 11 and one's 15. The conversations I was having at home were disturbing because Theo said to me, "Mom, why are you so tough on Al Franken?" And I said, "Oh, Theo, it is not okay to grope a woman anywhere on her body without her consent. And it's not okay to forcibly kiss a woman ever without her consent. And it's not okay for Senator Franken, and it's not okay for you." And so I needed to have clarity. I also needed clarity because I've led on this issue for nearly a decade. I've led the movement to upend sexual assault in the military and have accountability and a process so that men and women can be heard and have justice. I've led the debate on college campuses, ending sexual assault on college campuses, and I've since led the debate on ending sexual harassment in Congress on a bipartisan basis with Ted Cruz, which we ultimately passed unanimously. I got it for you. Here we go.
It's an important question. Don't read ahead.
And so for me, I needed clarity on this. And you know, it's hard when you have a colleague who's well liked to do what's right. It's really hard. And you know, there is no prize. There is no prize ever for someone who wants accountability against a powerful man who's really good at his day job. I could have told any of the other senators who followed me that day. And when I called in to resign, 34 other senators followed me. It might not seem like that today because I seem to stand alone, but I would stand by those 8 women again if it happened today.
Thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Follow up on that, Senator. The late John McCain took a number of stands on his own and was called a maverick. Why aren't they calling you Maverick?
I don't know. It would be a great
But is that sexism?
I don't know. I just know I've been in this space for so long, and I can tell you every woman and man who's come forward in the military against a higher ranking officer who's good at his day job, it's the reason why they are disbelieved, retaliated against, and justice is impossible. It's just really hard. And we've seen powerful people never be held accountable. And I understand these circumstances are very different than others. This is just allegations of sexual harassment, of groping and forcible kissing. It's not the same as sexual assault or rape, but it still matters, and it's not okay. And I believe we should have a higher standard, not a lower standard, for people in public service.
Next question comes from Dan Bergeron.
Maverick Gillibrand.
Yes.
As a school board member here in Manchester, I'm concerned about for-profit, publicly traded companies like K12.com that made almost $760 million in just 3 months. And 88% of that revenue came from managing public school districts. So I question who the priority is in that situation. Is it the shareholder or is it the student?
What company is that?
K12.com. And there's several of them. They've done well under
schools?
this administration, yes.
Wow.
That's 88% of the revenue for this particular company is managing public schools.
That doesn't sound like a good use of taxpayer dollars.
So I just question. So I guess, you know, when it comes to your administration, it comes down to policy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to reflect
Yeah,
on
sure.
the type of policies that.
The first thing I would do is not appoint someone like Betsy DeVos to be my education secretary, point one. I would appoint somebody who believes in public schooling, perhaps a public school teacher, someone who's actually understands why our public schools are so important. I believe that it shouldn't matter what block you grow up on. Every child in this country should have access to a high quality public school. So as president, I would do a couple of things differently. I would fully fund special ed. The fact that special ed is funded at 18%, it's supposed to be 40%. As president, I'd fund it at 50%. Because once you do that, you have far more resources. So you can have not only the special ed teachers that you need, but you can have more resources for the other teachers for higher pay and more resources in the classroom. I would also ask the federal government to fund aspects of public schooling that sometimes are left behind in public schools that don't have resources, like art, like music, like gym, like civics. And I would also have the federal government try to offset some of the bricks and mortar expenses. Those are the kinds of ways the federal government can help local school budgets. And I'd really incentivize federal money for states that are willing to equalize their funding. Meaning that if you live in a low-income district and your school is not functioning well because it doesn't have any resources versus a wealthy district that has plenty of money in this public school is great. That's wrong. It shouldn't matter what block you grow up on. So I'd really incentivize the states to be more creative about equalizing their funding and getting more resources to where it's needed.
Thank you, because there's only 1% increase in public funding.
Yeah, it's not
so
enough, and we need to invest in our kids. I'd also amplify that by investing in universal pre-K and affordable daycare, so early childhood education is being funded, and then our idea of national public service to get to debt-free college.
Right on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next question comes from Nancy Keene.
Hi, thank you for coming and answering our questions.
Of course.
I think a lot of us are undecided, and we're just trying to find a common area where we can relate to someone.
Yeah.
I am a former educator, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and the one thing that's really bothering me about politics in general right now is the level of discourse.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be any give and take the way I think the planners had expected it to be, that you couldn't have a debate. So I'm always looking for ways to have people say nice things about people. Could you, with so many good candidates running, and I won't hold you to this, but could you think of some of the candidates that are running that you would like to see in your administration?
Oh, I think almost all of them would be extraordinary in different capacities. We are blessed to have 23 Democrats who are running right now who have dedicated their lives in different respects to serving others. And we've heard a lot of really good ideas, and so I'd consider all of them in different capacities. And I would be delighted if they would serve in my administration. It would help make this country stronger and better.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. The next question comes from Natalia Orlando.
Hi, thank you for being here. Obviously, there's a lot of important issues that are pressing that keep coming up. Many you've already touched upon. What do you think, when you do get the nomination, that ultimately will be the defining issue that you and Donald Trump will go back and forth on?
All his broken promises, the fact that he promised to lower prescription drug prices and hasn't, the fact that he promised we're going to have better health care that's universal and cheaper, hasn't happened. All he's done is dismantle the Affordable Care Act. His promise to bring back manufacturing jobs and to have no bad trade deals, he started a trade war with China, which is really harming agriculture as well as manufacturing. The fact that he hasn't brought back manufacturing jobs, that he doesn't actually invest in what it would take to have more growth in the manufacturing sector and start rewarding work, supporting our unions, supporting higher pay, supporting better job training. He hasn't done any of the things he promised to do. And so all those people who voted for him, who felt deeply left behind, who felt that the economy wasn't working for them. He's the one who said the system's rigged, but he's the guy rigging it. He's the one who's lined his cabinet with the elite of the elite. He said he'd drain the swamp. All he's done is fill it up. And he's the big toad right in the middle. So I believe that, that I will talk about our differences, and I will talk about things I've actually accomplished in public service over the last decade and what I would accomplish as president versus what he promised to do and his failure to meet any of those goals.
All right, thank you. Very well said.
Thank you, Natalia. Next question comes from Tracy Miller.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Mitch McConnell is controlling the Senate and Congress. Why isn't there talk about removing him from office?
Well, there is. There's so much, and I just endorsed his opponent in his state for Senate. And so I'm actually very excited that we have an opportunity to flip that seat in Kentucky. I also believe there's at least 5 or 6 other seats around the country that we could flip. So he will no longer be the majority leader. And we have good candidates running all across the country. And so I have faith that if America's voter is on fire as they're on fire today, they just flipped the House in 18, I truly believe in 20 we can not only take the presidency, but we can flip the U.S. Senate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. A question coming in from Facebook, and Tony Masson. He asks, or says, please tell us how you're going to actually improve the economy and create more jobs than President Trump.
Okay, so a couple of things. The economy isn't working for everybody right now. Let's just be clear about that. The economists can say the economy is growing, but you ask regular people in New Hampshire, are you feeling that you're better off than you were yesterday? Do you feel like you have a brighter future than you had yesterday? And the answer is likely going to be no, because despite the low stated unemployment rate, real unemployment is much higher. It's between 7% and 10%, 12%. I mean, it's so much higher if you begin to count the people who've stopped looking for work or who are working more than one job but aren't fully employed. There's so much need for better jobs, higher wages, and more opportunity. So to make that happen, I would do at least 3 things. First, I would support our unions. When you have a union job, you're going to earn 25% more in wages and have better benefits. And so will your whole community, because when a community is unionized, there's higher wages for everybody. Second, I would support a higher minimum wage, $15. I'd index it to inflation so it keeps growing so people can actually feed their family even if they're working 40 hours a week. And you need to have a living wage to do that. I'd get rid of the tip wage. I'd put it all under minimum wage. Third, I would start investing in job training. I would guarantee that no matter who you are, if you're underemployed or unemployed, that we would use our community colleges, our state schools, our apprenticeship programs, and our not-for-profits to actually do the training to get them into a job in their community, in the field they want, so they can continue to earn their way into the middle class. One example, when Bombardier needed advanced welders in the North Country of New York, they went to the local community college and said, we couldn't find anybody in 500 miles. Just offer this coursework. We'll hire your graduates. It's a $70,000 a year job. They've already trained and placed 100 workers through that program. It works. And so imagine the federal government saying, we're going to invest in those programs around the country as a guarantee. So no matter who you are, you can be earning at a higher level.
Next question comes from Leonard Morrill.
First of all, thank you for being here today. I'm an undecided voter, and for the last 10 years, the most I've seen Congress is one party or another investigating each other. If half as much effort had been spent on Social Security, infrastructure, gun violence, or race relations, we would have come a long way to solve those problems. Why should I vote for somebody that's in Congress?
Well, I've been there long enough to know exactly what's in our way. I've been there long enough to see the greed and corruption at the root of every problem that seems so unsolvable today. I know exactly the special interest groups that are in the way of health care as a right, not a privilege. The drug companies, the insurance companies. I know what's in the way of passing a Green New Deal. The polluters, the fossil fuel industry. I know what's in the way to ending gun violence, the NRA and the gun manufacturers. And I can tell you, if you have no experience, they will run circles around you. I've been able to outmaneuver majority leaders who don't share my values by passing bills, by making the issue so important that everybody supports it. I did it with the 9/11 health bill. When the 9/11 health bill was given to me to lead, I was a freshman senator, and there was no interest by Congress in helping our 9/11 first responders. It had how many? It was languishing in the House for 7 years, had over 20 hearings, and it was dead on arrival. So I knew that I needed to create support. So I made sure the first responders came to Washington, knocked on the doors, made their case to every senator about what was happening in their lives, why they were dying of these horrible cancers because they breathed in all those toxins when the towers fell. They stayed on that pile, first looking for survivors and then cleaning up the remains. They had the hardest job. And the EPA at the time told them the air was safe. It was not. More firefighters have died since 9/11 than on 9/11. So I made sure I lifted up their voices. But it still wasn't enough. And I went on every TV show, CNN, MSNBC. Even Jon Stewart spent 2 whole episodes on the 9/11 first responders. It wasn't enough. I knew I needed Fox News. So I went into the Lion's Den and I met with Roger Ailes. And I said, Roger, why is your party not supporting our first responders? You say Republicans are the party of first responders. Where are you? And I convinced him he had to support it. And so we created such support that we have Jon Stewart on one side supporting it and Fox News on the other side. You're going to get it done. That's how we passed the bill unanimously. We changed the conversation in the country about this issue. Sometimes that's what you have to do. And as president, I know what I'm up against. I will use that bully pulpit to bring Congress along, to find those colleagues who are Republicans in red and purple states to work with me to get things done. I know how to bring people together because that's what I've done. In the last Congress alone, with the Republican House, Senate, and President, I passed 18 bills. 18 bills. President Trump had no experience, no relevant experience, no experience really at all. Has he gotten anything done? No, because he doesn't know how to bring people together. He doesn't know how to reach across the aisle and find common ground and get things done. The experience I have is the experience that the next president needs to actually govern and to heal this divide that President Trump's created. Because I represent everybody. It doesn't matter who you are or where you live or who you love. I will fight for you, and I will fight for your family as if they were my own. And that's who I am, and that's why I'm running for president.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Leonard. Next question comes from Clara Monier.
Good evening, Senator. It has been predicted that there will be a financial crisis in Social Security by the year 2035. Now, you've been in Congress a number of years.
Yeah.
Have you taken on that problem, and why hasn't this been solved?
Well, yes, I have. I've worked on a bill with our colleagues, some of whom are also running for president, to solve the problem. And what you need to do is blow the cap. Right now, only the first $130,000 is taxed at just over 6% to put into the Social Security Trust Fund to be there for you. But there's not enough. It's going to run out of money very soon. So I think all income levels should be taxed at 6.whatever%, so that we can have the resources we need to fund Social Security forever. The bill that we wrote has a donut hole, so we don't have to increase taxes on middle-class families. So it starts up again at $250,000, so it is for the highest wage earners in America. And that will restore Social Security like that. I believe if we talk about this across the country, we will get Republican support, because it doesn't matter where you live. Seniors everywhere want a viable Social Security. People who have been working their whole lives, buying into Social Security as their social safety net, want to know that it's there. So I dare Republicans to vote against it. I dare them, because their constituents will be angry and will vote them out. That's the kind of common sense idea that there has to be common ground on. And I would take it right to the American people and use the bully pulpit of the presidency to get it done.
Why hasn't it been done?
Certainly not under President Trump, because he doesn't care. And I think it's something that it needs leadership. And I will provide the leadership to shore up our Social Security and blow the cap to make sure it's fully funded forever.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Clara. Next question comes from Joan Krimlisk.
Hello. It's a question on energy. How would you implement more clean and renewable energy, upgrade grids, and reducing the use of fossil fuels?
Pass the Green New Deal, step one, put a price on carbon, step two, and then really create a national narrative about why this should be our ambition as a country. I love the parallel to John F. Kennedy, because he did exactly that. He said, we want to put a man on the moon in the next 10 years, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And he knew that if he asked the American people to participate, every kid would want to be an astronaut. He knew that every physicist and every mathematician would want to join NASA, because it was the thing. And so why not do the same thing with green energy and really invest in our companies that are producing wind and solar and geothermal and hydropower and biofuels? Why not really reduce taxes for any company that's willing to build energy efficient homes or energy efficient transportation or energy efficient appliances? Why not invest in the infrastructure we're desperate for, the high-speed rail, the rural broadband, the new electric grid, things that would really make energy efficiency and a renewable energy economy possible? And why not engage the whole planet on making this the ambition of our generation, that we are going to solve it? And don't negotiate a trade deal, don't offer support to other nations unless they're willing to take this as seriously as America will. That's how you do it. You use our place in the world to lead the rest of the world, something President Trump has been deeply afraid of and unable to do.
Thank you, Joan. Facebook question coming in from Don Lee. He asks, where was your outrage about immigrant children when Barack Obama was president?
I'm very concerned about what President Trump has done at our border. He has created an immigration policy where he is literally locking up children and parents, separating them. 7 children have died in his custody. No child, that did not happen under President Obama's watch. We have literally dozens of children who still are not reunited with their parents, and that also did not happen under President Obama. So what we have is something that's very new, and it's very destructive. And so as president, I would do it entirely differently. I would fully fund border security. I would make sure we have all the money for cross-border terrorism, money for anti-drug, human, and gun trafficking. But I would deal with immigration as the humanitarian issue it is, as the economic issue it is, as the family issue it is. I would pass comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship for the 10 to 12 million people here already. I would create a 10-year-long pathway where during that time they had to pay their taxes, local taxes, property taxes, Social Security taxes, and if they do everything right, they can become a citizen in 10 years. And then at the border, I would deal with these families just streaming in by 2 things. First, I treat them humanely when they get here. If they present themselves to the Border Patrol agents, I would assign them lawyers and court dates. I have a community-based system where they can live with families, live within a community, have accountability, and have a proper humane process with real judges. We don't have judges appointed for life who are immigration judges. They're just employees of the Attorney General. And I would actually invest in the countries that are so unstable where families are fleeing. If you turn a blind eye to the suffering in places like El Salvador and Guatemala, then this will never end. You need to recognize when a mother is so afraid for her son, so afraid for his life because there's gang violence in her community and he's going to be killed within the year. She's so frightened she sends him north, knowing that he might not survive the journey, knowing that he might not make it because she knows that's better than a sure death where she is. That's how desperate these families are. And I just ask America to just think a moment about what it would be like if it was your child. It's untenable what's happening in these other places. But when you don't have the courage to help others who need you, it will come back and harm you. I promise you. I've seen it in other places. I took a codel of senators to Syria, and I went to one of the, not to Syria, but to Jordan and Turkey to see the Syrian refugees. And in one of the camps in Turkey, we met with mothers, and they had tears streaming down their eyes, and they're so angry. And they were looking at these senators and saying, you are so afraid of Osama bin Laden. Every day you turn a blind eye to the suffering here in this camp with all these refugees. You are creating thousands of them. She wasn't wrong. So turn a blind eye, it will hurt you. You must help others when they need it.
Another Facebook question coming in from Tanya Knapp. She asks, what are your position on marijuana laws?
I believe we should legalize it, we should deschedule it, and we should decriminalize it. And I'll tell you why. First, from the healthcare perspective, I can't tell you how many patients I've met who medical marijuana and cannabis is life-changing. Whether you're a veteran who's trying to deal with PTSD or chronic pain or chronic anxiety. Many veterans find cannabis to be the most effective drug. Meet a mother or a father whose child has Dravet syndrome or a seizure disorder where these babies are having 100 seizures a day. They have found that CBD oil is far more effective than the barbiturates that are legal for their child to take. And why should a mother have to fly to Colorado or some other state to get the medicine, bring it back to their state, have it tested to make sure it's exactly the dose they need to just meet the needs so their child can survive? So I believe it should be fully legalized because we need medical marijuana in every state. We need to have it at every VA. I think we need to decriminalize it because the way our criminal justice system has worked with regard to marijuana is unjust. There's racial bias in criminal law enforcement. And I can tell you, black and brown young men are arrested 4 times more often for usage of marijuana, whereas a white young man uses it the same amount. But it's that racial bias in our criminal justice system that has to be fixed. And when you are arrested and incarcerated for marijuana, it could change your whole life. It might mean a job you won't get. It might mean you can no longer visit your mother in public housing. It might mean that you don't get access to certain apartments. You don't get access to certain opportunities. It's life-changing. And if you don't have the bail that you need because of our cash bail system, you might be locked up until your court date, which means you're going to miss work the next day, which means if you're a single parent, no one's watching your child, which means it puts your whole life, it becomes upended. So for the criminal justice reasons alone, I want to decriminalize it. And I want to make sure anyone who has been arrested for marijuana possession, that those arrests are vitiated. I would also then make sure we have equity investing, because if you're starting a whole new industry through decriminalization and legalization and descheduling, why should Wall Street make all the money again? Honestly, why not? Why not give communities of color opportunities to own marijuana businesses, dispensaries, growers, and to create a market so they can help thrive? And then all the money and taxes that we get from this new legalized industry, let's put those resources back into the communities that were so disproportionately harmed because of institutional racism in our criminal justice system.
Got about a minute left here. Can you give us your quick answer on what you would like to do with the opioid crisis?
So legalizing marijuana will help, number one, because I've heard from a lot of people who have survived opioid addiction that one of the best treatments is marijuana for anxiety and for chronic pain. Second, I would fully fund the prevention measures as well as the treatment measures. There's a bill in Congress that's going to put hundreds of billions of dollars into this effort over the next 10 years that really can make a difference. About $10 billion a year, and it would make a difference. And then last, I would make sure we take on the drug companies. I would criminally prosecute them, because the truth is, we've seen from the Sackler family's documents with Purdue Pharmaceuticals that they intentionally made the opioids more addictive to addict more patients. They cared more about profits than patients. It's the definition of greed, and in this instance, I think it's criminal. So I hope and I would urge that we fully prosecute and investigate anyone who has willfully addicted patients to try to have record profits.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, thank you
you
so much for joining us for
Thank you so
Conversation with
much.
the Candidate. Thank
you
to our town hall audience, and thank you to our
Thank you
viewers.
so
We
much for
appreciate it.
coming.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much.